Kotek.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It's nice to see you all. Since we're doing a little bit of bios, I moved to Oregon in 1987. Grew up on the East Coast, but moved out to Eugene at a time when I was coming out as a lesbian and found a state that I could be myself, and ended up going back to school at the University of Oregon. I had dropped out of college back on the East Coast, and when I came here, I settled in and was able to go back to school. Got a degree in religious studies at the University of Oregon. Had the advantage of getting a Pell Grant, having work study, being able to graduate without any debt. Put me on a nice solid financial footing to grow in this state. And after I went to graduate school, I came back to Oregon in 1998 and wanted to do something to make the world better. I had been fighting when I was in graduate school to make sure people could have access to domestic partner benefits. This is back in the mid-90s. And what I learned through that experience was not only do I need to stand up for myself and my community, I need to stand up for others, for fairness and equality. Those were driving factors for me. So I got really fortunate. I moved back to Oregon and got a job at Oregon Food Bank. I became a public policy advocate. Actually, I first got hired to be an admin because I was a great typist. I typed my way through college. But there was an opening, and so I became a public policy advocate for Oregon Food Bank. And my job was to figure out not to move the food boxes. That was a good chunk of what Oregon Food Bank does. It was to figure out how we could change public policy so people could afford to buy their own food and not have to go to the food pantry. And so my job was to literally travel the state, talking to folks, what was going on in their lives, travel to every corner of our state in that position. And the stories were about people working but not working, 2-3 jobs, not being able to afford because they weren't making enough to actually buy their own food. A lot of people with medical debt. This was pre-Obamacare, so a lot of people, were so far in debt from their medical bills, particularly people with disabilities. So I went to work. In fact, my job was to advocate at the legislature. I was the head of the Human Services Coalition of Oregon during the 5 special sessions, when we were looking at budget cuts. So I've always been very focused on making sure that people who are vulnerable, don't have the services they need, have a champion. So I've been an advocate my entire life, and so I was at Oregon Food Bank for 5 years-ish, 4.5, then moved to Children First for Oregon, became the policy director there, and that was mostly working on trying to get all kids health insurance. This was in Kulingowski's administration. Worked on child welfare issues, child care issues, things that would improve things for working families, and ran for the legislature in 2004. Got in a race very late because there was only one person in the race. I didn't win that race. Chip Shields won that race. Ran 2 years later and won in 2006. I've been in the legislature. I was there for 15 years. Really focusing on human service issues, healthcare issues, housing issues, making sure that, everyday Oregonians could actually make ends meet. I did become Speaker in 2013 when Democrats came back in the majority and served there as Speaker of the House for 9 years. Longest serving Speaker. That was never the intent. Year after year, I'd be like, well, if there are things to do to help make things better for people, I'm going to stick around. And then the last 2 years in the pandemic, just very eye-opening about how hard things were. We would have many conversations about how things weren't working. And last August, my wife and I sat down and said, there's going to be a new governor, and we have to make sure things work. And I decided to run because I want things to work. I am tired of things not working. When you are a legislator, you pass budgets, you pass bills, you assume the executive branch is actually going to follow through on those things, and we just haven't seen that. And I think the next 4 years are so critical for Oregon to rebuild, to build back, build a future for Oregon where people can be successful. And the particular crises that are facing our state are things that I care about a lot: housing, homelessness, mental health, and addiction. And I just want state government to be more effective. And right now it's not working very well. And frankly, people need it to work. And so that's why I'm running for governor.